Hello, friends. Welcome to our next day in the Circle Unbroken, rooted in soul, responding in our world. And today's topic is soul memory. And like all of the topics, wow, right? I mean, that's how I feel when I just sit and reflect, like, what could this session be about? And I'm always taken by the many directions that it could go in. I guess that's a bit of my quantum consciousness. Maybe I'm much more living on that level than any other level. But let me read for you that what's in the email that you have, or the Patreon blurb you have. The theme is the wisdom that already lives within you. The reflection prompt is, what truth has always lived inside me? The meditation focus, remembering, accessing soul knowing beyond time or words. The blessing words, I remember who I am. The wisdom lives within me still. So the theme that's listed under this overarching theme of soul memory is the wisdom that already lives within you. So it presupposes that on a soul level, you are wise, which means that everything and everyone that has a soul, on that level, they are wise. And I find that quite fascinating, that wisdom isn't something that we particularly grow in, but it's a capacity that we grow in the access of retrieving, that the soul has an innate wisdom. I think where there's, you can go where you want with this, because I like exploring, is it true or not? But I think where you do get evidence that it might be true is with the statement, out of the mouths of babes, right? How often a child will say something incredibly wise and like, where did that come from? And it certainly wasn't the fruit of their personal development in this chronology. There was something there outside the time-space continuum. And I remember when I was young, I felt that I had the experience of thousands of years. Not that I necessarily had the personal development to know how to be wise or holy or anything like that, but I remember having an issue, and part of this is my Aries nature, but part of it was true. I had an issue when I would be put into a box that I was just a child, right? Because I felt like I had already seen the breadth of all beauty and the breadth of all tragedy in even the first 4 years of my life. And I was cognizant of it. So there was something in me that said, don't tell me I don't know life. I may not know what to do in every situation, as many adults don't know what to do. But I had a real issue with this idea that wisdom comes with age. And that has served me well, because it has allowed me to be a bit more open-minded and hearted in discovering where wisdom is, independent of the disguise of the age of the person, or the status, or the title, or the role. It certainly has also had some downsides, but I'm just pointing out the upside there. So what we're talking about with wisdom is here that we're accessing it, and that soul contains the fullness of all things, and we are remembering. But I want to get into a different bit of an angle with soul memory, because as I was thinking about it, where I was really taken was, does the soul have a memory? What do you think about that? Do you think the soul has a memory? I mean, isn't that fascinating? Stop and think about that. Does the soul have a memory? Now, I looked into it a little bit, and largely in philosophical and religious traditions, that the soul is seen as a place where a record of experiences, knowledge, and knowledge transcending this current life exists. And I would say that that's access to the Akasha, which would then imply that the soul has ready access at all times, that the Akasha isn't off limits to one or another person, but it's readily there for anybody who wishes to be open on a soul level. And that by virtue of that access, in a way, holds it within the self. And that memory, this is held in many, many traditions, memory is a faculty, a function, or a power of soul. I just think that's fascinating. I mean, think about that. We so often reduce memory to the function of this life. Aristotle, who noted that the soul has faculties and powers, recognized that memory is one of those powers, and memory recalls, retains, and recognizes. This would be like deja vu, or when you're resonant with something that you didn't expect to be resonant with. Right? But some hold that memory is really just an activity of the mind. And remember that the mind is not the brain. But others hold that the soul utilizes the brain. So maybe the memory isn't sitting in the brain. Maybe the memory is part of the mind. But the soul uses the brain as a way of getting there. I like that one. Now, we all know that brain damage or brain degeneration affects memory. And does this mean that there is no soul memory? There is one postulation that says it just means the soul cannot use the brain to access the memory that it has. This is very liberating, these thoughts. I'm going to give you 3 stories to add a little bit of breadth to your reflection on this. The first is with my grandma Wilson, so my mom's mom, and she suffered kind of like early dementia. In her 70s, she started showing signs of dementia. From there, she lived to be 90, I think, and she just simply lost her memory and, in a way, her mind over that time. And I remember sitting with her one time, and I was sitting there with my 2 aunts, because my mom didn't live near her, but her 2 sisters did. So when I would visit, a lot of times the 2 sisters would come visit as well. And we were all sitting there and chatting, and I remember I had on jeans that had holes in the knees, and I guess I don't know if they were in or not in, but I had a pair of them. I was probably in my 40s. And I remember my grandma, who was a seamstress, of course, was running her finger on my knee, and mentioned something, again, from her state of not always knowing who we were, that she needed to get that sewn for me. Like she needed to fix my jeans. But then she said something pretty remarkable, and she said, "We've always been wondering where you belong." It was something along those lines. And my Aunt Joy and my Aunt Jan just stopped and looked at her and me. And I looked at her with surprise, but I knew she was speaking a memory on a soul level because of the sense of belonging, because of the evolution of my own path and how it continues to evolve and change the connections and constellations of people that I'm with. And she said it so placidly. There was a little touch of sadness, but it was kind of just an objective, neutral statement. That, I think, is soul memory and collective soul memory. She tapped into something there. Soul memory. Now, a lot of times this is at play if you believe in reincarnation. Now, not all schools hold that you need to remember your other lifetimes or even believe that they are so. And I am of that school. I think that past life and memories, that is a plane of consciousness that may be helpful and may not be helpful in this lifetime. Doesn't really matter. Doesn't matter. It's not life or death if you believe in it or if you don't believe in it. But the experience of it is a soul memory, right? It's a soul memory. And think of how often children, I don't know if you've ever listened to this, and it's worth it if you want. There is an amazing, it's a series of books, or I listened to it through an iPod, Destiny of Souls. Very powerful if you're interested. And this man was a hypnotist, and he was very of this world. He didn't believe in other lifetimes. He didn't believe in other worlds. He didn't believe in lives between worlds. And then under hypnosis, people were beginning to talk about other places. And he was taken largely to the space of the soul in between physical lifetimes. Destiny of Souls. When I was 40, I had a beautiful friend, Terry Greenwald, who is now passed. She's died of skin cancer. And she was very, very gifted with consciousness, with transmission, channeling, and the use of astrology and tarot in all that. And she gifted me a natal chart and a transit chart. A natal chart is your astrological chart when you come into this world. A transit chart is in this present moment. So natal chart will give you kind of the large view of how you're coming in, maybe what some of your life lessons are, what some of your orientations are, your gifts, your challenges, all the rest. Transit is what's in this moment right now, what's actually happening in this moment right now. And as she was doing that reading for me, which was very impactful, out of nowhere came a memory. And this memory evoked overwhelming guilt for me. It was through my eyes. I was looking at a stone wall, and lined up on that stone wall were children. And I would guess they were like 7 years old, like not super old, but they were different ages, but it was largely around that. And they were all lined up, and they were looking at me with incredible fear. Oh my gosh, the fear. And when that memory came up again amidst this reading, and she was not focusing on past lives, she was focusing on a number of other things, but as consciousness does, it brought it forward in the place that it could be answered. I shared it with her, and I said, whenever that memory would come up, which was rare, I'd feel overwhelming guilt, because my sensed understanding was that I was hurting them, that I was some kind of vicious soldier, because it was clear it was warring times and these children were in danger. And I carried this guilt around for years. I remember the memory first coming when I was probably 18. So we're talking 22 years. And here it came up with all the guilt, and I blurted it out. And she's looking at my chart, and she was somebody that didn't hesitate. She wasn't somebody that thought for a minute, and that she was like bam, 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 bam. She was, her leading sign was Virgo, and because of her purity and her gifts, her Virgo made her very detailed and precise. She was like on it, at it. And out of nowhere, she's like, bam. And she's like, no, 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 no. You weren't hurting them. You were the head of an orphanage. And because of the warring times, you had to leave the orphanage, and you were behind a wall, and they were looking to you because of the bombing. You were their only safety, their only security. And what's significant about that, we all like to think that when we feel we've done something wrong, we're innocent. But that wasn't the nature of this here. That wasn't what I was looking for. But it washed me of all that guilt. And again, it wasn't because I was vindicated and I was innocent. It was because what she said felt like an accurate interpretation of soul memory. She was recalling, as Aristotle would say, she was so tapped into soul, she was recalling accurately what the lived experience was, and she was communicating it to me. And it washed me of that guilt that never returned. I can tell that story now, and it's like, yes, it was a part of my past, but it has no charge anymore. It has no charge. Soul memory. And the ways that others can participate in our soul memories. There's a third story I want to tell you before we get into our meditation. I remember when I was having all my ecstatic experiences that were on the honeymoon level. So when I was like 19 to 24 years old before I entered the monastery. And I remember kneeling in the Santa Cruz, California chapel, mission chapel. And I was in one of these very deep states. And I was downloaded a knowing of what vows were. Up until that point, I was probably 20 years old at the time. I had, interestingly, but not surprisingly, because of the way the Catholic Church is, I didn't know what vows were: poverty, chastity, and obedience. I didn't know that they were part of a religious order life. I didn't know anything about them. I, to my knowledge, in this life, in this form, as the Kimberly, I'd never heard of them. Poverty, chastity, and obedience. I'd never heard of them, even though St. Francis of Assisi and Therese of Lisieux were so popular in culture. But I was downloaded with a grasp of them so intimately that when I entered the monastery, they had a course as a novice. One of the courses went into a lot of different theology, and we spent time on the vows. And she brought them up like I would know nothing about them, which would have been normal. But I already knew everything about them. Where did that come from? What soul memory was it? And was it a memory of my own past? Or was it simply the collective knowing that gave context for my call to be a monastic? These things seem independent of our physical lives, and yet this physical life is using it as, or this physical life is a way that the soul is accessing it. But why? Why? And is it safe, and does it matter? We are really the answer for that. Where you can gather a bit of information is, where do you have charge? And that charge could be in any direction. Remember yesterday we talked about this moving to a reaction state, that on a quantum level, that there are vibrations and interactions that are happening that are intended to create pathways. They move to a reaction state. They cause a movement. And reaction in the best sense of the word, not in reaction like a defensive. Why does it matter? And how does it matter? And how can you open yourself to the soul memory? It can offer context. It can offer context for the reasons certain people come into your life. Not as a way to analyze and get really dualistic around it. For instance, you could use, like, let's say you are experiencing somebody putting you down or oppressing you in your gifts, or that you may do a past life regression and discover that in a past life you were put down for speaking your truth. Or you have a knowing that that has happened over ages and that you're experiencing it again in this lifetime. That could be the case for you. You could do that and observe that, and that could give you a sense of context. But where we can fail in our freedom process is getting caught in the story. Because in that knowing, we can revolve around it and wrestle with it and be at it and avoid it and work with it all our lives. What if it was just a soul memory that was light? Like that. Light. Like my grandma, who was so innocent, who said it so lightly. We've all been wondering where you belong. Who the heck was wondering where I belong? But she said it so lightly. And then we went on to something else. Could we allow these memories to let them bear the fruit they're meant to bear without us clamping down around them? But where it can be helpful is noticing where you have charge, where you have contrast or resistance or wrestling, or where you have resonance, where you're drawn to. Both of those can be signals of where the soul is remembering. And remember, it's not just about past lives. It could be of any realm. Destiny of Souls painted that very well. It could be of any aspect of existence. It's an adventure. Oh, that's a lot, right? All right. So today we are going to do a mantra for the goddess Sarasvati. So Sarasvati is considered a deity that is connected to the opening of intellect, wisdom, music, knowledge, communication. But this feminine goddess, feminine deity, is also considered to be a gateway, a strong gateway, a portal to memory on the soul level. She's not the only one, but that when I've done research, she's come up the most. So we're going to do a very simple mantra, Om Aim, which is the seed syllable for Sarasvati, Aim, Sarasvatye Namaha. And we're going to do it in a unique way. And what I want to invite you to, and again, with mantras, you may have a resonance towards, you may have a little pull back, you may be neutral. Notice that and see if that might be a soul memory on some level. We're simply going to chant this to open up to that kind of soul memory that can give us the greatest consolation in this lifetime. And that we will be willing to go there. It's one thing to get knowledge that's inspired. It's another thing to actually go there. To not hold back like you're the master of it or the observer, but to actually release into it and let it inform you. Let it form you, inform you, let it come into you and form you. Okay. I invite you to close your eyes. And in your own way, open yourself to remember on a soul level. And allow the sounding of the mantra to inform you, to open you. Your soul's right here. You are your soul. It's right here. You don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to grasp. You don't have to try. You don't have to accomplish. You don't have to just open up. Inviting in a breath. Om Aim Sarasvatye Namaha. 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 We move into the silence where the field of soul memory can be experienced. And inviting in a breath. Om Aim Sarasvatye Namaha. 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 We bring this very short practice to a close. When you're ready, bring your palms together in front of your heart and open your eyes with Namaste. Namaste. Blessings, my friend.